It's good to see people checking in from all over the place.
Yay, I got away.
But I guess we'll just give people another minute or so to arrive and to check in. And then I'll hand over to you and Alex, Tanya, if that's okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. Okay. Chris, we just wanted to say thank you so much for doing this with us and to start off like our lecture series and everything. And for Ed for organizing it and, you know, like having all this put up for us. And we just wanted to tell everybody thank you for joining in and, you know, like starting this lecture series off for the year. And just that if anybody has any questions, like you guys can reach out to us for like the future lectures or anything. So yeah, we hope you enjoy.
And also we're hoping to achieve quite a lot of this kind of online series. So we're going to be starting SAWSA YouTube channel, which we'll link in the chat box. And this lecture will be available for you later on. Thank you, Chris, for kind of agreeing to start our online YouTube channel. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy.
It's the weirdest lecture I've ever will have given, though. I'm used to seeing a load of faces who respond wonderfully and we can talk and chat. And it's not quite the same, is it? But hey.
Yeah. Well, let's hope we can bring a bit of it here as well.
Yeah, a little bit. We have some
got
cameras on, so that should be nice.
We've got a few faces here. Let's give everyone another 30 seconds or so, and then shall I introduce Chris?
Yep.
You do that.
So we're on 83 people and counting, Chris, but a number of people are sharing logins and cameras in a COVID sensitive way. So how's your chair feel? Is it going to hold up?
Yeah, I got a spare one. It's not a problem.
Okay, good.
For those who didn't know, when I was sitting here just about to join, the chair fell apart. But like a good architect, maker, fixer, sorted it, I hope.
Right, I'm going to keep letting people in. And Alex and Tanya, please feel free to do the same thing. Alex and Tanya, do you want to say a couple more words again for the people that have since joined? You're muted, Tanya.
Yep, sorry, my bad. Yeah, we just wanted to say thank you for everyone for coming, and thank you to Chris, and thank you to Ed for like organizing this thing. And we have more lectures planned in the upcoming weeks. So hopefully all of that works out, and we're trying to kind of make everything more accessible. So all the lectures will be recorded and they'll be put up on our YouTube channel. So you guys can refer back to them if you want to use things for your assignments or, you know, whatever that may be. And at the end of this lecture, there'll be like a Q&A. So if you guys can, please turn your cameras and mics on to ask questions. Or if not, then please just type in the chat box and we'll ask them for you.
Great, thanks, Tanya. And I suppose an early thank you to both of you and to the SAWSA team for sorting out what should be a really interesting series of talks, starting today with Chris. So it's my pleasure. I get the easy bit to do today. I get to introduce Chris, say a couple of hopefully nice words, and then just sit back and listen. But it is my pleasure to introduce Chris to you today. He's Cardiff born and bred, which in a kind of a socially distanced remote learning way is nice to have. He's an alumni of the Welsh School and also a long-time supporter of the school. He was certainly tutoring in the school when I started teaching back in the late 90s, without giving anyone's age away. Sorry, Chris. He's also a great employer of our graduates, and we see a lot of current and past students pass through his office. It's a practice that was founded in 1992, Chris?
Actually 87, but then we changed because I was in partnership. But then my partner was ill and we changed the name, and Loyn & Co was established then, yeah, in 92. 87 we kicked off. 30.
Okay. 87, so that's more than 30. So across those 30 years, in addition to maintaining an endless and slightly demoralizing level of energy and enthusiasm, he's consistently been rigorous in promoting the benefits of contemporary architecture, I suppose, while also adopting the position, which I'm going to quote from your website, Chris, says that architecture is not about the object, it's about the life that goes on within and around it, which feels like a really appropriate place for us to start. The practice has won a string of awards over the years. Most recently, they picked up an RBA award, the Sunday Times British Homes Award, and the BBC Sterling Prize People's Vote for their Outhouse project, which some of you, if you cast your minds back pre-COVID, will remember there being a small exhibition of on the second floor of the Butte building. So that's it from me. Over to you, Chris.
Okay, thanks. Lovely to sort of almost see you all. Here we go. We're just going to get the slides up and the images and go full screen, and then we'll get going. Hope everybody can see this. Yep, can we see? Right. Am I okay with just leaving all that, the other images extraneous around that image there?
Chris, we can see your screen grey, and also we can see your cursor if you happen to want to point to anything. I will, just to mention, I'll keep monitoring the chat box. So if anyone wants to drop any questions or comments in as we go, myself, Tanya or Alex will pick those up perhaps afterwards.
Okay. All right, well, here we go. Connections, and the more I thought about the title, the more I realized just how many connections there are relevant to the subject of architecture. So I've done my best to try and draw these together. That's a pun, because it's literally draw them together. I'm going to use a lot of my drawings to try and communicate this, mine and others, in fact. These linkages are, in my view, what is fundamental to the creation of a quality, serious architecture. So let's get started. Your hand. This is my Penarth Pier in front of you. I say mine, it's Penarth Pier. It's a connection in itself. It's a connection between land and sea. And it's a connection between you guys and me, because as Ed said, this is where I've lived for the last 33 plus years and practiced architecture for the last 33 years. Let's get on to the first one. For every 100 who look, only one can see. Now, walk around the world with your eyes open. Get hungry eyes. Start looking at beyond the skin of things so that you truly see where you are and the buildings you are. And the best way to do that in this digital age is not click, click with a little digital camera. No, sit, draw, study. That's how you see a building and you know how it's weathering, how the detailing is working, is successful or not, how it's constructed, the tectonics of the building. So draw, draw, draw. Now I'm going to start by talking about place, region, country and climate, because, well, pre the international style, that was universal across the world. It was identified by the place on the planet that you were actually residing. And I think that's coming back. We're becoming more local these days. Yes, I am a modernist, again, as Ed said in the introduction. I believe in architecture of the time. Mies said, architecture is the expression, the will of the age conceived in spatial terms. We live differently to how we used to live. So therefore that should be expressed in our architecture. So let's have a look at weather. It's a photograph, actually, it's an abstract photo. It's a piece of rubber, but it caught the light. And to me, it was the sun, it was a snowstorm or a rainstorm. It said weather. And so I started with the cold. You think of the different characteristics, the landscapes around the world, how you start with, this is Japan. And it is so different to this, which is the European Alps. But yeah, they're both cold, there are similarities, there are high winds, all sorts, but they're very different. And the architecture, as a consequence, will be different. There on the left, you have Hidden House, a painting I made. It's a buried house. And so, of course, the shelter that they require is from the snow, and you get these massive overhanging eaves in the Swiss architecture. Very different to, on the left, Portugal. Different materiality, different color. Totally different. And on the right, hey, Barbados, the shelter there is not from the snow. Oh, no, no, no. It's from the sun, isn't it? Shade. Difference between shelter and shade. And then you have tone. We're into Venice here. Look at those rich reds. I mean, they even named a watercolor paint after Venetian red. It's appropriate. So you can tell a locality by its tone. There, Italy. Ha-ha. No, no, no. You see, we can also play tricks. This is actually North Wales. It's Port Miriam. You should all go and visit it. It's an astonishing little invasion of Italian architecture into Wales. So you can cross borders for a bit of fun, but not too often. When you have a mineral-based architecture, when you have a locality that produces, has in its region local stone, it creates a tonal architecture, a mineral architecture. We should respect that. That's why I don't get on very well with the volume house builders who scatter their Tudor beethan little blind boxes around the country, regardless of where they're dropping them, scattering them on the land amongst a sea of tarmac. No, 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 that's not the way forward. We should be more specific than that, I feel, and respect the locality. And look at the colors there, South America, oh, the Rainbow Mountains, amazing. But look at the colors of the sunset in the Gower, Gŵr, Rosili, the same colors. Different, yes, but we've got color as well. And look at our mountains, our hills, our rolling hills, different, but still with beautiful color. But by picking up on that color and that materiality of the area that you're in, the region you're in, the country you're in, so your architecture can fit. It can become contextual. My favorite word, context. Look at the light. That's Italy. It's so, so different to the previous slide. And so different to, here we are, we're in Amsterdam. When you have water, that gentle, soft light of early morning, reflecting in a shimmering liquid as it flows down those beautiful canals. And it doesn't matter where in the world you are, day, night, time comes into it, the connection of time. Same buildings, but they change. Those eyes that are there, dark eyes in the day, reverse at night, and they become blazing beacons. And here we are traveling through the day. We're back in Amsterdam. See how the buildings have shifted from the detail that you can see when the light is sharp to silhouettes. Now, all of these factors you should be considering in your creations, your designs, your architecture. A couple of lights coming on in the distance there as evening draws on. But then night, bam! And all those dark eyes become blazing light. And people looking out, you can see them in their windows. Whereas during the day, it's harder to see because the windows are dark. You can see out more easily. And it reverses. So think about this. Think about the place and the time that you're designing your building for. Full scope of time and in a specific place. And here's one of our buildings we did quite a few years ago now in Dinas Powys, not too far away. You can go and visit it. You can see it from the common. And it's evening and its windows are starting to glow. And then at night, this was the opening party. Hooray! It glows. Now that gives your building a different feel, but it's just as an important feel. If it can be seen, hey, and it affects as well the ecology. I mean, you have loads of bright lights like this, no bats are going to be flying around there. And we're starting more and more to think of ecology and our buildings and our impact on issues of sustainability, basically. And there's the city skyline, Cardiff, across Cardiff Bay. These are all paintings that I've done, I've studied, I've looked, I want to see how it changes over time. And even in Wales, when you travel, this again is Gower, West Wales is the same. You know, the winds come in off the Atlantic and they howl in and they throw the rain at you. It almost comes up in Wales, the rain in these locations. And this knowledge of this sort of weather has influenced the architectural design in the years gone by and should influence our design today. We don't copy, but we're influenced by it. And have a look at that. That's the White House in Jersey. It's the most astonishing building. They cover the whole thing in white. Gook, cement, lime cement. Bam. It glows, it's wonderful, but it's abstracted it. And why have they done it? Because the winds howl so strongly against it. It would have lifted off the slates and blown them away. We have the same technique and tradition in Wales on coastal areas. We paste the slates down. The slates were the material that we had to make a waterproof roof, but the wind would lift them off and chuck them across the fields. So we glued them down. And it affects the architecture. CAT, Centre for Alternative Technology. Now got the WISE building, the Wales Institute of Sustainable Education. I teach there, and I was sketching en plein air with the students, and it started to rain. And they ran for cover, and I thought I would go for cover. I don't know, it's rather beautiful actually. The rain hit the paper. It started to bleed the ink, started to run my watercolors for me. I thought, this is gorgeous. This makes this a painting that could only be from that place because it's made out of ingredients, the water, the rain that fell there. It's of the place. And I took it a stage further. The following day, I went out with the students. I said, we're going out to paint again today. It was a bit of a better day, actually. Rare for Wales, it wasn't raining. We went out and I said, we're going out to paint. The worrying thing is, I'm not going to allow you to take any paints. Shock. Yep. Bam. This is my sketch called Quar. It's quarry, Welsh for quarry. And the Centre for Alternative Technology exists in a disused, redundant slate quarry. And the colours you can see in that painting are not paints. It's earth, it's crushed leaves, it's berries found on the site, it's of the site. And that's how I think our architecture should be made, particularly now when we're trying not to import slates from China or Spain. Why not use slates from Wales, local materials? Search for them locally. It's good, sustainable practice. Now, in the years gone by, I've done a lot of traveling with the Welsh School of Architecture, visiting amazing buildings. But don't only go and see the great, don't just study the great, study also the humble, the local, the vernacular. Beautiful buildings, great lessons, fabulous. And look at this one here. This is what I'm going to talk a little bit more about. And I'll show you a slide actually from this one later, which is the Rue de Suisse, Herzog and de Meurne, and this one, Daniel Libeskind, the Jewish Museum. And I use it. Libeskind isn't, I would say, my favorite architect, but he's a very clever guy and does some amazing things. And this is an amazing building. That's it, in model form. That's his plan form. And every twist and turn both has a story, but it's a connection. It is a story. That's what he does. He connects you and takes you through the horrors of the Holocaust. And I didn't just sketch, I scribbled notes. This powerful building, more than I ever expected, not just geometry, the materials, the detailing, the light, the form and the space, but the sound, the temperature, and experience of the body and mind. He really did, he touched every bit. It's kinesthetics, it's the textures on the wall, he even tips the floor. And so as you're walking, you're thrown off center. It's incredibly powerful. Now, if architecture can do this, think what we can do for joy as well, not just as a museum for a horrific time in history. This was a chamber, and you walk into it, and it was a chamber from the tower on the first photo. The slit of light at the top, that's all you see. And you walk in, and it's a self-closing door, and it clangs shut behind you. And you realize it's a cell door, and everything's dark except for this one little light coming down. And as your eyes adjust, you realize as well, it's cold. It's an unheated space. So he's playing all of these experiences. Architecture is not just visual, is where I'm trying to lead you. And you walk through these amazing cavernous spaces where you're feeling you're being observed. And you suddenly realize that through his architecture, he is telling you the story and the history of Nazism and Jewish horrific time. And then, as you get towards the end of the journey, you have this in front of you. This is called Fallen Leaves. It's a sculpture, and it's in one of those caverns, and you're being observed by people as they're traveling through the building looking down. And to get to the other side, you have to walk across it. You have to tread upon the faces of people. And they make noises, clunk, like steel noises. And they mean chains. They mean the railway carriages on the way to the death camps. It's so symbolic, it's powerful. And I was sort of almost crawling across it quietly. I felt so embarrassed and ashamed. And as you were clunking quite gently, and around the corner came a whole gang of school kids, and they just hurtled straight across, and the noise was deafening. There, treading on screaming faces. Absolutely, I mean, and that's architecture at its most powerful. Not my favorite architects, I say, and a building taking you back to a horrendous time. So I made a series of paintings looking at how he brought light in, the outside in, the spaces, the structural systems. The one on the left there, this one, called Lightfall. It's like a waterfall and how he seeps light in. Think about this in your design and use it in a positive way. And now that, on the other hand, is one of my favorite buildings. Beautifully contemporary, but also contextual. The tree even grows through the entrance slab there. It's a gorgeous piece of architecture. So if you can engage positively with all of those attributes and those sensations and human emotions and turn it to wonderful spaces that people will have joy, fantastic. That's what we're about, I think. Now, so far, we've talked a lot about place. Here we are on the Locher estuary, just outside of, well, on the Gower coast, overlooking towards the Llanelli there. It's a rusting old listed lighthouse. The object. Architecture is more than the object. But there will be objects, and it does to a certain extent. It has a solidity, so it is an object, but it's not only the object. But when you're dealing with a piece of architecture, remember, this is the angel of the north. Now, you normally see it head on. That's how people normally photograph it. When you walk around it, it actually changes its form. This is the advantage of making models. You can test that three-dimensional form really well. So make models. Different view. Another view. Now, what's different about that to the first two views is this little fella here. Scale, the human. That's the first time you've realized just how big it is. Unless you've been there yourself. But as a drawing, that tells you how big it is. Human scale is important. That's yours truly sitting on a little pebble on an Australian beach. Now that's scale. Without me being on there, you would think I'd zoomed into a little rockery or something like that, or on a beach. No, it's massive. So in your drawings, include the human form. Gives you an instant feeling of how big or small something is. Back to objects. Normally, objects are reserved for our key buildings in our towns and cities, or as markers in the countryside, the church spire that shows you where you're going, a wayfinding device, and a hierarchical device. Here we have on the left Prague with copper roof, different materiality. On the right, Rome, sketches I made whilst I've been in these cities. The dome of Berlin Cathedral, different form again. And this is an interesting one, tagging on to time, the connection of time. On the left, at one end of Hope Street in Liverpool, you have the Catholic Cathedral, rather rudely called Paddy's Wigwam nickname. On the right, you have the Anglican Cathedral, Lutyens. Now, if you were to look at that and think of style and time, stroke age, you would imagine that the left-hand one, the modern Catholic Cathedral, would have been built and finished ahead of the one on the right, but you'd be wrong. It took so long to build Lutyens Cathedral, it was actually finished after the Catholic one had been built and completed. Which brings us into the quandary of design when we're making our buildings prefabrication. You need it quickly. If time is a factor, think about the material and the method of construction and where you're getting it from. If time is a factor. If it's not, well, happy days, take as long as you like. And then there was a shift. This is New York. On the right, you have St. Patrick's Cathedral. But behind you have another cathedral, a cathedral to commerce. And now that shows how our hierarchy has shifted. And we now sort of praise many. It's the economy that's driving the world around. Now that's changing. We're in a world that is changing at the moment. It's fascinating. Everything was modern once. And when you think of your object wrapped, we wrap space and place it in space. It's not alone quite often. Well, it's never alone because you're either in a naturalistic landscape or you're in an urban landscape. You've either got buildings around you or you've got trees or beaches. It's always with something. That's the context. But if you imagine an urban condition, there's your red building. It's in relation to the other rocks that are already there. And one of the important things is what's not there. I mean, there's a lovely quotation from The Fountainhead, 1947, book by Reynand. And thus, the intrinsic significance of our craft, that's the craft of architecture, lies in the philosophical fact that we deal in nothing. What? Yes, we create emptiness through which certain physical bodies are to move. By emptiness, I mean what is commonly known as rooms. Thus, it's only the crass layman, and I've added in here rather rudely, or planner, or developer, or contractor, close bracket, who thinks that we put up stone walls. We do nothing of the kind. We put up emptiness. Absence is superior to presence. Nothing is superior to something. What I'm talking about, something I'm obsessed with, which is gaps between. Gaps. And when you think about it, it's gaps that enable everything. It enables flow in streets. It enables alleyways. You have a hierarchy of streets and ways of moving around the building. And then you come to what? A door in a building. It's a void. The door opens. It's an opening. And what lets the light in? A window. It's an opening. It's what's not there. It's not what's there. And when you're inside looking out, you look out through an opening. It's what's not there that is important. And it's that dual consideration in our designs that is vital. So gaps. This is Palmer. Paintings I made of the beautiful alleys there. Now, they're gorgeous, those alleys. You walk through them. It's warm. You look up. You see the blue sky. Fabulous. Sometimes you get gaps that are Now, this is in order back to the towers of commerce, the cathedrals of commerce. This is in order to call those two houses probably executive homes and to call them detached. What a load of bunkum. It's the nonsense gap. And here we have the alleyways of Barcelona that lead somewhere. You go through and you come upon a special square. It's a way of cutting through the big urban blocks. Beautiful. And we have those in Cardiff, don't we? Yes, the arcades. But the difference is here, because it rains so much, we put a lid on them. We put a little umbrella, a hat. So we stay dry. The arcades, great characteristic of Cardiff. And the scale doesn't have to be tiny. I mean, look at these cavernous avenues of New York. I painted the sky purple and green in order to try and emphasize the gap, what was not there. Wasn't strong enough, I felt, so I got it there, bright red one. That seemed to do it. And interestingly, for me, the one on the right was a painting I made at the base of the Twin Towers. Of course, they're no longer here, tragically. And that painting is called Now All Void. Time changes, things are removed. Nothing is there forever. And I did a series of charcoal drawings in order to emphasize the strength of these gaps, these avenues. And off the main avenues, quite often, you don't just have inside out, you have outside in. And you'll see a gap and you'll see beyond, and there's light, and you know there's a beautiful courtyard further on. You're drawn in through it into the space beyond. Courtyards are wonderful. There's one from Outhouse, one of our buildings. It's an open courtyard, this, and it looks out onto the fabulous landscape. But there are also beautiful little enclosed courtyards. That's Stormy Castle. Both of these projects I'm going to show you in greater detail later on in the talk. So, Inside Outside, which was the nickname for the outhouse before that was its working title. But I'm talking here about looking out from within and looking in from without. And beautifully put by Peter Zumthor. We exist in universal space. Architecture borrows some of it. I love that, borrows. It brings in that idea of time and the fact it is not permanent. It will go itself at some point in the future. Nothing lasts forever. It becomes a contained space within a containing space. So you borrow some of it. And then again, Andy Goldsworthy, you can see how that thin line defines the borrowed space within. And there is the universe beyond. So the skin of the building, this is outhouse. Skin of the building, which defines the inside and the outside, can be thick castle walls or can be a slither of glass. And Rachel Whiteread, in a 1993 Turner Prize winning project where she filled a house with concrete, I think really expresses what architecture is about, that capturing and borrowing of the space, the volume. And by poking out that bay, what she's done, what the architect did, was pinch a little bit more of the outside space to add it in to the inside space. Fabulous example of the volume of the room. And this is shown in this section. This is a little project we're doing in the Gower at the moment. You can see Portainan Bay and Horton in the distance. And my rather pretentious, not nearly as good as Zumthor, but he's a bit better, isn't he? He's not bad. My definition of the art of architecture, which is the simultaneous manipulation of internal and external volumes defined by their means of separation. And if you look at that section, imagine if we expanded this screen forward, bingo, you'd get more within, but you've taken away from the outside. Now in a street scene, a tight street scheme, that can be critical. So consider both the inside and the outside simultaneously. And when you are inside and you've poked your little bay out, bing, what can you see? That's important. Orientate your windows to the direction that you want to see. And this, to me, is the key difference between traditional architecture and contemporary architecture. Think when you're designing your house, we take a house. Where does the sun rise? Orientation. Where does the sun rise? Oh, it rises over there. Well, put the window over there that you want to capture the morning sun. Do not put an evening room facing that way. This is where the volume house builders just fall apart, because they drop their boxes and their standard plans and they can be totally facing the wrong way. Nonsense. If you're designing something, think about the movement of the sun, think about the view, think about the prevailing wind, orientation. That's what's important. And now we have two examples of two projects, one in Abergavenny on the left here, and how we framed that view. As you walk through the door, you've got no idea that the mountains are beyond. You approach it from the street side, boom, and you've got that view. It's like a painting hanging upon the wall. And similarly, on the right, that's outhouse. It gives you a glimpse of the view that you are going to actually see in its full glory later on when you've got into the heart of the house. And that's the view that you'll see from the heart of the house. You don't also have to limit to just seeing in. You can also see through. And this is important when you consider threshold. If you're going to travel through, and as the father of a lad, now 31, disabled, cerebral palsy, wheelchair user, I am absolutely passionate about flush thresholds, merging the inside and the outside so that you can just go straight in. This is outhouse again. Why have a step? You look at the houses around about, how many of them have a step? And then you had to build a ramp to get a wheelchair in, or a push chair, or somebody with a Zimmer frame, because we're all living older, thank goodness, I'm getting on. Oh. Reflection. Glass is an interesting material, it's fabulous. Sometimes it lets you see in, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes you want it to reflect the landscape, sometimes you don't. And you can use this both inside and outside, and it's not just glass, it's the material onto which the light that passes through the glass falls upon. You can get all sorts of different atmospheres. Use this, understand it, study it, and then you know how to design with it. It's building up your knowledge, your palette of materials. On the right is that Rue de Suisse building that I mentioned, Herzogen de Meun. And you enter from the main street through into a courtyard beyond, behind where this is sketched from. But they wanted it to be bright, not a dull tunnel. And goodness me, they did that. It's glossy, bright green. It's a phenomenal experience. And it's an absolutely lovely building. You should have a look at it, look it up on the net and get all the facade of the building is all shutters that move by day and by night. So the whole image of the building changes. Fabulous scheme. And on the left is a painting I made of St. Donat's Art Centre, which we did in 1993. And it's a structural glass wall with a glass fin. And I can't claim I did this intentionally. It was a happy accident, but I've learned from it. The glass fin beautifully reflects what's off to the east, to the left, which is such a different view to that which you see when you look straight through the glass. So you can play games once you have the ammunition and the knowledge to be able to play those games. Now, you don't always want reflection. This is a sample we have from Guardian glass. And the glass on the right is ordinary glass. You can see the reflections. This is our office in the background. Glass on the left is low reflective glass. Now, in sensitive areas, that can be an incredibly useful asset. And the planners, in fairness to them, ask for this frequently when you're building in the countryside. And it's good. It's a wonderful material. So know your materials. Then you can know what to specify. This is a house we're designing at the moment in the Cotswolds. We've just got planning permission for it. It's a paragraph 79, which means basically, we haven't got them sadly in Wales. It means it's a house that in open countryside, and it's intended to enable the continuation of the tradition of the English country house. And it's a sensitive area. Here are my sketches. You can see, and so we used non-reflective glass in all these instances, so they don't shine on a landscape, because you do have, as you can see from the perspectives here, distance views. And there's a sketch courtyard in the front, and then the outlook in this direction. But as I say, with non-reflective glass. Gaps, still obsessed with gaps. If you fold this in half across the center line, it becomes a Christmas card. It's the office Christmas card I drew many years ago. 2000, I think it's 2000, says down there. It's called Gaps in History, because with all the pressure to be in keeping, we're in danger of forgetting that everything was modern once, and that changes have to take place because the way we live is changing, the environment is changing, we have to respond differently. So we can't keep copying what's gone before, we have to break out, we have to be of our time. And this is an interesting illustration. It's good historic practice where materials wear out, that's time, they go, and they reach the end of their life, they need to be replaced. You don't replace them with something which is in keeping and matches the old. No, you insert something that is new. And this applies, in my opinion, to what we should be doing in our town planning. We should be inserting new where the old have to go. Yes, we're reusing much, much more now because, quite rightly, the most sustainable building is the building which exists. And we're heavily moving in that direction and not before time. But new and old should not copy the old. Raphael Moneo here in the city of Murcia. It's funny, when I was standing there, most of the tourists were looking the opposite direction because Murcia Cathedral is right behind me. It's Cathedral Square. And I was fascinated by his addition, not by the cathedral. Ah, yawn, it's another cathedral. Anyway, personal opinion. Now I'm going to take you on a few case studies just to show you how we have integrated our buildings into the landscape. The Pines, Slade Bay, it's in the Gower Peninsula, an area of outstanding natural beauty. It's a tricky site. There was an existing house on the site. It was absolutely trashed, horrid, foul, and totally in the wrong place. Client didn't want it. We could see no way of keeping it and achieving their brief. I'll talk about the client and the connection with the client later. There is the site there, and in this direction is the most glorious view of Slade Bay. And the house at the moment is tucked right at the back. You can't see that. Well, that was not the best place for it. There it is, tucked right at the back. And that's the view they had. Oops, oops. So it's in the wrong place. You see why it's called the Pines. So the first thing we've got to do is a decent site analysis and understand where we are designing. It's a heck of a slope down to the valley road and up the other side just as steeply. The house at the moment is there right at the back. There it is as you drive up the entrance driveway. And these are my initial sketches. Learn to sketch all the time. And when you're in meetings with clients or you're visiting the site, sketch. And I came up with a form something like this as an idea, using the topography of the site and stretching it forward, still at the same arrival point, but stretching it forward in order to capture that view, which was the client's desire. And we started modeling it then using the technology that I am totally incapable of using, but the young guys in the office are fantastic at. Well done, Adam, who's sitting next to me in case something goes wrong with the electronics and the buttons here, and he's listening and learning, I hope. So we model it on a computer. We look at it from afar. This is where it is at present. And we envisage what we would like to see, how we'd like to thread it amongst the trees and leave the trees and just sensitively insert a new house, and yet at the same time allow it to look out, to peep out at the sea. That's the form of it, with this atrium in the middle, which I'll talk more about later. Arrive here up the hill. Plan of it, roof plan, context always shown on plans, and my sketch of the arrival. And you'll see the story of this is taking the landscape inside. It's totally blurring the inside and the outside. And the wider angle view showing Slade Bay, the view to the right there. And that's the end elevation as it peeps out from the trees. They do have a golden Labrador, by the way. It's not just architect's license. And there's the building nearing completion. And there's that elevation I drew. We haven't done the landscaping yet, as you can see, and that's your view. I think we did it. Another one. And look at the reflections. Helps it merge into the background, into the foreground as well, into the treescape. There's the atrium. Let's go inside. And we planted trees. Not my choice of trees. I wanted to go from the forest species, but hey, it's not my house. It's not my home. It's the client's home. And there's a big distinction between house and home. And I'll talk about that, if I remember, when we come up to talk about Stormy Castle and Outhouse, because there's a big difference there. We make houses as architects. The clients, the occupants, make the homes. And very few of us actually have the joy of being able to live in a purpose-designed house for us, to make it our home. We normally inherit from somebody else or purchase from somebody else. It's a second hand or third hand or fourth hand, whatever house, and we make it into our home. It's an important distinction. So we brought the wildlife in here. The greenery comes into the house, and we've taken it even further. We have a moss wall inside. We have a cork wall inside, relating back to the gravelly, gritty, earthy feel, the stony feel around and about. And so as you wander through the house, you get this lovely light and these great views of the greenery inside and outside. And we've got greenery going on the roof, of course, early days, because this is still under construction. And there at the back, you will see on the left-hand photo, our array of PVs, which we always go for a fabric first house with our designs now, highly insulated, low energy, well sealed buildings. And there's our sustainability statement there. The pines. On to the next one, Stormy Castle. An amazing site in Gower. This was done, well, we started it in fact in 2010. So we've moved on a lot since then, but it's still very relevant to show you the integration and the connection between building and landscape and how we've embedded the new house. This here on the bottom image is the existing house that was on the site, peeping up over the horizon line. And we decided that what we were going to do was actually bury the fella into the hill. And if I can find it here, a lovely quotation from Frank Lloyd Wright, which we have adhered to. No house should ever be on a hill or on anything. It should be of the hill, belonging to it. Hill and house should live together, each the happier for each other. That connection with the site. And here are some early sketches looking at how we can do that. Burying the bedroom wing low down here, links through all the way up, one connection to connect the three levels and up and peeping out as the hill rises up, as the slope rises up. And we were looking at materials because we're on a coastal area. It's got to weather well. Pick your materials to weather well. This is concrete. We had a lot of cement substitute, much as we possibly could, and we had it from Port Talbot, which is nearby, using the GGBS substitute for cement to make it more sustainable. And there's an interesting argument with use of concrete sustainability, which, as with many materials, it's to do with longevity. I first went to the Centre for Alternative Technology in 1977. The buildings that were put up then were brand spanking new, and they looked fantastic. They don't look so great now. They're rotting, they're being taken down, there's maintenance issues. So think of the materiality that you use, the materials you select for your buildings. How long is your house or your building to be there? Make those judgments. Sketches showing how it nestles in, and I was picking up on the color of the gorse with the Core 10 steel as the protective skin for the exposed parts of the building. The more subterranean ones hunkered into the hill with the concrete. And of course, we make models. Best way to really see a building proposal, because they are completely unforgiving. You can't pick a preferred view. You can see it from any view and every view. Sketching, sketching, sketching. There is the new building. There was the original building. It's lower impact. It got planning support. And we built it. Freshly completed. There shows the Core 10 and the header. I wasn't making it up. It does actually exist like that. The bracket, rather. Entrance, now maturing as the landscape takes over. It's virtually covered now. These are quite old slides. Now, this house was for a very particular client. And when I show you Outhouse, what I would really love to do is take the client for this house and transport him to the other house, and take clients from the other house and transport them here. Because a lot of people have said, oh, it's not to my taste, it's a little bit cold, it's a bit like an art gallery. Well, the irony is that the other house is an art gallery, but a lot of people say, oh, it's a lovely house. And it's strange. So I would love to swap the clients and see how they occupied this house as opposed to the one they're in at the moment, and vice versa. This is the distinction between house and home. When you've got a view like that, you've got to have a little extra glass. It has to be a contemporary design. That's their hallways before they fully occupied this. I did not pick that sofa. That was the client's choice. And you get a feel of the building. And there's a little secret courtyard for the bedroom. Little internal space, hunkered out. That gives south light, glows in, it enables thinking of orientation again. And because they've got a fair bit of land around them, they don't need any privacy for the taking a bath in the Nicky Nobs. They can quite happily be there and appreciate the outside as well. So thinking privacy depends upon location. Connections to that side, that's a roof. You don't think so? I love picking up the surface of the ground, inserting a new building and putting the surface back again. Then you don't have any land take. You add to it. You have your ground floor, but you still have the site. You just put it on the roof. Solar shade. And now the landscape starting to take over the building. Love it. And this will age well, this building. It's important. Oh, thinking about it over time. Area shots. I mean, look at that view. Not bad, terrace and roof. And some snapshots of how the light moved around and the views you get from different locations. And this is a painting I made trying to pick up the abstract geometric shapes of the building itself. It's another one of Chris's Christmas cards. Night Night, Stormy Castle. Now we move on to Outhouse. Forest of Dean. A beautiful setting. That was the existing house on the site, and there were two other outbuildings over here as well, which you'll see more of in a minute. the clients, Michael and Jean. Now, clients are another connection you will have to make as architects. It's once you're down onto looking at a site, 9 times out of 10, unless you're building a standard box to drop somewhere or something like that, you have a specific site and you have a specific client. You've got to connect with the client. They have to connect with you. You have to nurture that. And when you do, it's a fabulous relationship. And it's a long relationship because you invade their lives for a goodly length of time. They adopt you. Michael and Jean adopted me. They still have, in fact. I still go back and forth. In fact, I took Adam last year, along with the whole office and some other students as well from the Welsh School of Architecture to visit. They're beautiful people, Michael and Jean, 2 artists. And there's the site. This is their land. There's the existing house and the outbuildings are here. Entrance to the site. The outlook from the site. This is our site analysis, looking at the existing buildings. And I liked and wanted to respect the locations of the existing buildings. Not great architecture, you have to say. And client just didn't want to live in them. They'd lived in old buildings before, historic buildings before. They had a 17th century house before they came and moved to the purpose designed outhouse. But we didn't want to totally destroy it. We wanted to reuse as much as we could. So the idea was this is the concept. We start with the existing house and buildings. We take off their roofs and their upper floors. We leave the shells. We put a new roof over the whole site to accommodate their live-work requirements, which again is a very current requirement and happening more and more. We've got to find workspaces at home. And this is why it got the concept name Inside Outside House. We left the insides of the original buildings as outside courtyard spaces. So we inverted it. Sketch of the approach. We wanted it to be a low-key, quiet entrance. And this is how I sketch, and time comes in, and I'll talk about it right at the end again. Time of sketching. I don't take meeting minutes as such. I sketch the ideas because when you're dealing with 3-dimensional issues, you train yourselves to sketch what's in your mind, and you can communicate with the client, and that's making a connection. And that's what actually won this job for us. Sketches around. And that's an aerial view of the finished article. It looks a bit like a model, but it actually is the finished article. There it is, hunkered into the hill, completely flush linked with the field behind. Fantastic outlook, a good overhang to protect it from the sun, to stop the southerly sun overheating the building, and to diminish the impact of the glazing so it doesn't glint in the Forest of Dean sensitive landscape. More sketches. There you can see the retained original buildings. There's a story about those as well that I can go into, but I won't go in at the moment. I'll tell you another time perhaps. And so the organization of the building, the bluey is the work bit. They're 2 artists. They wanted 2 studios, 1 studio, 2 studios linked together. And that's the footprint of the original house. It's on its north side. It's cut into the hill, but of course, north roof lights, perfect, even light, great for the art. So we went through various iterations, exploring different configurations and layouts, but the principles were sound and remained. These are the final elevations of the building. They're what I call threshold elevations. They show both plan and elevation, so you can orientate yourself and relate the inside to the outside. And there's a southern elevation. It's light glass skin around here, capturing the view. The red here are the existing buildings, the existing walls that we intended to retain. And a section showing how it relates to the site. These are the sort of drawings you want to be creating to communicate your ideas to your client. A roof plan. And the courtyards, one we created here called the Earth Courtyard. This was the old house, the fire courtyard. This is the old garage. We called it the water courtyard. And this is the air-cooled pantry. So it's the air courtyard, fire, earth, air, and water, the elements. Oop, sorry, I flipped too fast. There we have the courtyard shown in green. That is the gallery, the link that makes the separation, the distinction between the living on this side and the working there. There is the living. And finally, the service part. So we made a model. You lift the lid off and you can see the spaces inside. And this is the reality, a quiet entrance. Our shouty architecture should be kept for rare occasions and depending on the building. Back to where we were talking about originally churches. Why shout? Why not be quiet? We don't want black gates with gold knobs on the top and bling. No, absolutely not. So you approach it quietly, under an entrance because of the weather and shelter, and you're in. Let's go on the roof first. It's got a turf roof. Of course it's got a turf roof. I've picked up the landscape and I've put it on the roof. I've inserted the building underneath. This is it during construction, a muddy pile. Then the grass started to grow. Then it grew more and the building started to disappear. And that is what it's like. It's part of the meadow. We saved the wildflower seeds and we reused them. It's of the site. And it's embedded on its northern side. One of the courtyards, this is the Earth Courtyard that we created. Looking down into it. That's the lovely Jean, beautiful client, in the Air Courtyard, the pantry. Michael, Jean sitting in what's the fire courtyard, the footprint of the old house. This is it. And finally, the water courtyard, the old garage. And at the back, this stone from all of the demolitions we reused as a retaining wall within the landscaping works. And they have another pond at the back of the house there at the western end. Integration of landscaping, vital for the building. It's not separate. Always draw and think of the landscaping whilst you're designing and the external spaces. More of the stone reused, the southern facade, the southwest corner, looking along the building into the Earth Courtyard. The living space, the kitchen. From the meadow, the lower meadow, looking back at the house. Along this walkway. Now you'll see in order to make, although I love this seamless junction between inside and out, no threshold there. It's wetter out here than it is in there, obviously. So you can't have the polished floor that we've got inside. As you come out, you've got to give it a texture. Otherwise you slip and you'd end up with clients with broken legs. Not a good idea. So what we did was press the plants from the clearing of the site into the cement mix to give it its texture. Again, it's of the site. Those are plants that were there when we arrived. Integration with the kitchen garden. All they have to do is stand on this walkway here and pluck apples from the tree. Here we are back at the front door. Underneath there, the steps that lead up onto the roof. Let's turn around, let's go inside the building. There is your gallery. Jean's just hanging paintings at the moment. See how the space works? And we conceived this hanging system within the cast concrete in order to give them flexibility for the hanging of their artwork so they can have exhibitions here. It's not a bad exhibition space, I think. That's the water courtyard. There's the front entrance screen. This is the gallery. And look at the view and the living space. It's not bad, really. I'd quite like to live there, but I'm not going to. Shame. Beautiful view. Beautiful view. Nature does it pretty well. Michael sitting, reading in the comfort of the sitting room. The kitchen. One bedroom for Jean. Again, she can sit in a bath, look out. Hey, fabulous connection with nature. Michael's bedroom. He carved this himself and he made this screen. Fascinating. Let's go into the studios. That's the studio entrance. This tells you about the client and the connection that we had with the client. His drawing is rather like the black concrete we used inside. It's got similar textures. There he is working on a massive canvas here. And there's Jean drawing in her studio. They're inspired by plant life, by textures. There we have it. That's our material samples. Green grass for the roof, water for the water courtyard, glass for the strips of roof line, burnt timber, the Japanese technique of preserving softwood. There's the range of materials. That leaf on the top left, it fluttered down and landed on the formwork when we were casting the roof. Pure accident. What a beautiful thing to happen. And it's been cast permanently into the ceiling. You look up and it's there. Wonderful moment. Happy accidents do happen. Cantilever stairs up to the roof. The way we bring light in. Here are some of their artworks and their artifacts. You can mix modern and old, new and old, as long as both are clear and there's a distinction between them. And that's another connection. Whenever we put a new addition alongside an existing building, always make it distinct. Yes, you may separate it with a glass sleeve or something like that, but you should never ever copy, in my opinion. Otherwise you blur the boundaries of history. These are some of the geometries that we saw in their artwork as well. That's the roof light. The quality of the concrete, I think, is beautiful. And that's corner of the black, one of the black concrete walls. Look at it in relation to Michael and Jean's artwork. That's Jean's drawing called Plots. It's so close to the material. That's the connection we had with the client. The materiality of the building is them. It's their artwork. The textures, the tones on Michael's painting. There. No, that's not Michael's painting. That's the corner of one of our walls. The two are almost inseparable. More of the pressed in leaves. This is the power floated concrete finish that we applied to the floor. It's knowing your materials to enable you to create artwork within the material of the architecture. And see how it sits with the things that they find interesting, the sculptural forms. It works. And there is Outhouse in the evening. Bye-bye, Outhouse. These are two photographs from studying and looking. I see things in the strangest of places. That's not a moonlit evening overlooking a lake with the trees in the background. It's a bit of Courtaine as it's weathering. It's one of the stages the steel goes through. It's fabulous as the rain runs down. I turned it sideways for the horizontality of it, and the one below. I experiment with my own materials on my own house. This is my black rubber bathroom. Sounds a bit funny, but it's not. It was a very practical and very interesting material. But this is how the light fell on it, and it surely is a horizon looking out over the sea with the waves in the foreground there. So your hungry eyes take in things and you see beauty in the everyday, and you can apply that to your architecture. It's building up your knowledge. Materiality and time, sharpness and roughness, coarseness. This is schizophrenic part of us architects. We want precision, and yet we also love something that ages, the patination of time. And it can be, as I say, in the everyday. Look around you, the glorious colors, how materials age and weather. That'll tell you about detailing, and then you can control it. More and more we're looking at reuse and integration of new and old. This is just a quick example, but it's also an example of a set of drawings that I would encourage you to try and follow, to really look at the context, the wider site, before you hone in just on the building material and the immediate locality of the site. Go wider. Look at it in the topography of the site, materiality always, and see how we've integrated new into old, respecting the old. This was a fascinating commission that we're yet to build, and they're abroad at the moment. We're yet to build, and he's a theatre designer, and he wanted all the walls internally to be flexible, so that he could hunker it down, or he could have a massive party for the whole set when they came from having made a successful film or play or whatever. And so we were using stage scenery, ball bearings that you can move, all of the parts. You can move up to a ton with just a push, and then they have little brakes on them. So we could, all the walls were going to be storage walls, but you could move them, so you could open up the space. Now think about that in terms of today's pressures for flexibility within the home. Is it a dressing room, or is it going to be your office? Do you suddenly need more space in your office? You know, thinking in that way, future-proofing your buildings, very important. Links, I talked about new to old. It's not the greatest of slides is to communicate it, I'm afraid, but there was a water tower. We inserted the window openings very sensitively into the rhythm of the brick, and we extended it with a horizontal tower. So it's like a couple of Jenga blocks, but the connection between the new and the old was this glass bridge link, and the materiality of the tower still read on the interior of the new extended home. And this is the tower here, you can see it. There's the tower, and here's the new work attached to it, respecting the integrity and the totality of the original tower. That, I don't think I'll read it all. You can go back and read it yourselves, but it's about housing and relationship to context, a little statement for you. And finally, coming towards a close of my talk, we're talking about speed sketching, sketch wherever you go. This was out of a hotel room when I was in Manchester, St. Paul's, when I was sitting having a lovely glass of wine, and across the Thames, the walkie-talkie building, definitely not my favorite, the cheese grater, blah, blah, blah. But you sketch them, you sketch things you remember. Another technique that I've developed is sketching slides. So when somebody is giving me a lecture, I will sketch those slides as the slides are up there. It trains your mind to remember key images, key factors, and to speed up your drawing. Train yourselves, and then you can sit with a client and sketch ideas for their buildings in front of them. And finally, the last connection is you are not alone. Teamwork. It's you, it is the client, it is you, it is the landscape architect, it's the structural engineer, it's a mechanical and electrical stroke environmental engineer. It's a whole host of people, and critically, it is the person who makes the building. If you can relate to that person and communicate your ideas, you will get the building that you had in your head. So your stallion, your beautiful, gorgeous, muscular stallion, will not end up looking like a camel. I'm not so good at numbers. I'm better with a paintbrush and a pencil. I need an engineer. I need other people around me. I need a team. That's the end of the talk. Thank you very much. Clap, 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 clap. I don't know what we do now.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was really, really interesting. And like all of your work was so nice to see. So yeah, thank you so much for the lecture today. If you don't mind, should we ask you the questions now?
You can indeed, by all means. Fire away and I'll do my best.
Okay, so now guys, there's a Q&A time, and we saw quite a lot of questions in the chat. Would you want to come kind of live and ask them, or do you want us to kind of put them into Chris. I think first question was from Jasmine, so.
Whatever's the clearest way. It's quite difficult hearing. That's probably up at this end. What are the options?
Either they read off the chat or the person who
Hello?
Oh, let the person who asked the question ask them, might as well.
Hi, Chris. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm all right.
Are you okay?
See you. I haven't seen you for ages.
It's been too long for me to catch up with a pint again.
Well, there's other people in the background waving too.
So I was just wondering, with watercolors, do you think do you use it because it's the best medium to capture kind of the atmosphere of a place, or is it just a matter of convenience, or maybe a bit of both?
That's a good question. It's something when I was deciding whether or not I wanted to do architecture, I thought the only way to do this is to go and get a job. So, and this was a summer job when I was in school, and I went and joined Percy Thomas Partnership, and there was a Percy Thomas's personal, in fact, also office perspective artist happened to be there, and he sat me down next to him, and he taught me to set up perspectives, and he said, sketch. He liked the work I did, but he almost always used watercolor, a lot of pencil work as well. And then later on, again in Percy Thomas, because I kept my relationship with them, there was a fabulous watercoloring artist employed by them, who was one of the partners there. And I just thought it was such a quick, not easy, it becomes easier, quick, efficient way of communicating ideas. It's not only color that you can communicate, it seems to me a great medium, but it's something I've done for so long. I wouldn't say it's by any means the only medium at all. I mean, what the guys do with their Photoshop now impresses the hell out of me. I mean, it's fantastic. And I see other people using crayons beautifully. And I did use crayons for a long time, actually, as a little bit safer, not so devastatingly, you can ruin a whole painting just by doing the wrong splodge with a watercolor. So it is a bit unforgiving. But because I'm old, hence the solar panel, I've been doing it a long time, and I'm just comfortable with it. Does that answer your question? I suppose it's saying, no, it's not the only way, but I like it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It definitely looks amazing.
Yeah.
I've got one more question about something else. So you're mentioning slate earlier, and obviously in Wales it's locally sourced, which makes it a bit more sustainable. But also the kind of production of slate is quite, it uses loads of energy, there's loads of waste products. So realistically, how sustainable do you think slate actually is for local buildings?
That's a really good question. Obviously, any quarrying now is scarring and taking away a finite resource. But there's a lot of existing slate in Wales. It's imaginative reuse. Its embodied energy is there. It's what I was saying really about the concrete. I mean, I've been really heavily criticised when I've gone up to lecture in the Centre for Alternative Technology for the use of concrete, and I totally understand that. And it's something we are now, as an office, pulling more away from, and looking more towards timber structure. And I've come up with something, and I should have included a slide in here. It's called embedded without being in bed. And it's what it's saying is, look, instead of retaining, actually, if you're cutting into a hill, batter it, build a separate wall, and you can still get the connectivity of the roof over, and you have a sort of utility space in the zone that is behind the building. Then you don't need to use the concrete. And the weakest thing of any retaining and tanked system is going to be the membrane itself. And all of a sudden, by this embedding without being in bed, you don't have to tank it. So we're reviewing all the time, and that's one of the fascinating things I find about the history of architecture. Is it's quite often the styles are driven by their knowledge of technology and the demands of the age. It's back to that Mies quote I gave earlier. It's going to affect the aesthetics of the architecture that we produce, this environmental crisis we're in, and that's good because it will make an embedded style for the genuine reason and not being a fashion statement, which I don't like. It's not wallpaper, it has an integrity to it. So yeah, if I had to take down a building because the walls were collapsing and there was still a sort of half decent lump of slate on there, I would look at how can we reuse it. We're looking at a set of barns actually up in Shropshire area where we were looking, there was a lump of concrete on the one wall and we were going to crush the bricks on site to make the pinky tone to use it as the aggregate for the concrete, but it was off the site. So it's, yeah. So every building will have an environmental cost in some way or another. The judgment is by you, the architect. Is it a good decision? Is it a bad decision? And back to what I was saying about longevity as well, and protection and light. You know, it's all of those issues together. That's what makes this talk, I think, the title of the talk so interesting. Connections. Everything is interconnected. It all impacts on each other. Shall I shut up now and go on to the next question? I'll give you another link.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hopeless. Lovely to see you both. Bye.
Okay, so now we have a next question for Bethan. Bethan, would you like to come forward and ask yourself?
Hi, Chris. I was just wondering, do you have any tips for measuring ground level changes for an elevation if your existing building is on a slope like in a lot of your projects?
Yes, it's back to what I was saying about teamwork. We do actually use a proper team of surveyors to do our topographical surveys. There are the good old-fashioned ways of doing it. If this though is, are you talking about a college project here?
Yeah, so the current retrofit project I'm doing.
Yeah. What I would say to you is do your best to gauge it.
Okay.
It might not be spot on and accurate, but as long as once you've done your drawing and you've said, yes, this is what I take the site to be, don't then retrospectively cheat and pretend it was something else by manipulating your design because it doesn't quite work if that was the actual ground level. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
You can't be expected to get it bang on. I mean, you can drop tapes, you can eye things, you can look for horizontal lines, DPCs, brickwork lines. You can take gauges off that, so it doesn't just have to be a wild guess. But yeah, unless you're going into water levels or things like that that you can do with squeezy bottles and all sorts, the old-fashioned way of doing it. Just do the best estimate that you possibly can.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
And George, would you like to come forward?
Yes. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
Yeah, good to see you guys. Thank you so much for the lecture. I was just I asked it in quite a sarcastic way, but it is actually a serious question about whether we can call a heavy concrete ceiling comforting for a sitting room. And it kind of goes on to the point about concrete and kind of, obviously you're acknowledging that the embodied carbon dioxide, when you use it, it is a bit of a problem. And obviously it's a bit set off with the long-term gains of it being very long lasting. But do you feel if you were to stop using it, that you'd be losing out on some of the kind of emotive value that it has?
No, to be honest, every material has a beauty. There's no such thing as a duff material. It's just a wrong application of a material. So you search with the palette that you have in your possession. And as I've said, we're taking a stance away from and trying to use less concrete. So that's a conscious decision that we've taken in the practice. And we're doing our best not to. Yeah, I love this stuff. I mean, I've said it several times. I'm very old, aren't I? I was brought up in a time when you got excited. Corb, that last slide there. Look at one shot. It's incredible. But if you cannot do it anymore, I mean, I find it 12th century cathedral incredible. You look at the flying buttresses. It's incredible. Now, okay, time moves on, connection, let's search. We'll find another incredible material. We'll do something else. We will. What's that? Rammed earth, yeah. Well, we're doing a rammed earth building at the moment. We're doing a rammed concrete one as well, which has got not a lot.
Shanice. Thank you. Perfect. Shanice. SHANICE. CE. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
I don't know what that was, but it was quite good fun. Does that answer you, George?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks so much, Chris.
All right. Cheers.
Yeah.
Tom, would you like to ask yours? Would you want us to ask? Do you want to come?
Yeah, hi, Chris.
Hi, Tom.
I was just wondering, you talked about a separation between live and work in regards to the artist house there. And I was just wondering, where would you kind of draw inspiration from in forming a separation between a space for live and a space for work in a very small cottage terrace housing plot that we've got to retrofit?
Yeah, it's a good one. That's for you to sort out, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a couple of things. First of all, for the first 30 years in practice, I practiced from the house. Okay. And at the peak, there were 8, 9 of us in the house, plus me, 2 kids, and my wife.
Yeah.
Really busy house. But being a sort of, well, I was going to say, I'm a 50s child, right? Okay. I brought up in a sort of hippie era, and hey ho, everybody lives together, much together. We shared the loo, we shared the kitchen, not at the same time with the loo, but it was living and working close together with one another, and it wasn't a problem. With regards to us, it was a bigger house, mind, I have to say. With regards to a smaller test, I mean, my feeling would be, is there somewhere in the garden you could use? Could you pick the lawn up, put it on the roof?
Yeah, okay.
Studio out there, and then you've got to think about your neighbours. Ooh, can't overlook. How are you going to protect that? Is it overbearing? Is your new structure going to cast a shadow over your neighbour? You've got lots of things to think about. So I can't give you an answer to that, other than.
No, I know it's quite site specific, but I just thought, I think it's going to be trying to form the plan, like picking things up on the plan and moving them around and forming new spaces, like what you said, inverting and things like that with the courtyards.
Yeah, and going up the sky.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, hey, what? It's only historic planning that says, it's got to be in keeping,
Yeah.
Well, hold on. If we're all going to need an extra floor, why don't we have an extra floor? Then you in the structure of the existing building, you're sitting on load-bearing walls. Could that be the answer? It's got to be designed well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. That was really good.
Thanks. Alex, do you want to ask yours, or should we ask it for you?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks very much for your talk. I think a lot really resonated with me about what you were saying about light and hierarchy and relationships and nature and experiences, and embedding that in your design. I was wondering if you perhaps had any advice for applying principles you've talked about in what one might describe as the digital age.
Yeah, get somebody young in the office like Adam. I'm not very good with the digital. I'm genuinely not. I really struggle with it, and I accept that. As I've been talking about with architecture, there comes a point when the old's got to go out and the new comes in. I think it's fantastic when I've got a team around me. I still love using it as a wonderful design tool. The three-dimensional programs that you can get now, I think, are fantastic. I just struggle to learn it and do it myself. But it's out there, and I think you use everything at your fingertips to create and convey and communicate your design proposals. Is that what you meant, Alex?
Yeah, sure. No, thanks very much. Yeah, totally.
So I mean, use them. Don't just because I draw and paint for presentation doesn't necessarily mean that you guys have to do that. I'm saying it's a blooming good training to get your eyes and your mind attuned and connected and to understand. It's a great way of learning. Just as I think reading a book is a very good way of learning. Yes, there's a lot online, but I still like thumbing back through a book, and I am little markers in the book, and I think there's a tactile human quality to it that's really important.
Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
We have one more question in the question box from Dan. Would you like to come forward and ask it?
Yeah. So some of your paintings are like beautifully dense and urban. Like, would you work in a more urban setting, or are you more comfortable with the rural?
I've been meaning to send my studio a few examples of some of the tight urban schemes that we've worked on. We have, yes. I suppose it's my fault. I should have included those within the talk to have rounded it off, but I knew I was pushing it with 250 slides, and
Well, your hedges are beautiful, so as well.
You're very kind.
Like a hedgerow.
Yeah. Yeah, we do dense urban buildings, but we do try to green them as well. You know, that's important. Yeah, an awful lot in Penarth. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
I think that's all of them in the chat box. We just wanted to ask if anybody else had any questions. You guys could just come talk.
Yeah, I've got one.
There we go.
Hiya.
Hello, Chris.
Hiya.
I've got a quick question. Looking at your project, it seems you're really interested in nature in a whole. Especially with the green roofs. I wanted to ask, when you have a project, do your interest in green roofs, do you influence your clients?
I can't hear you. Out. Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Can you hear now?
Why I'm getting closer. It makes no difference at all.
Can you hear me now?
I'll go again. Can you repeat it? Sorry.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, better.
All right. So I was saying, when it comes to the projects, do you influence your clients with the green roofs, or does your client really influence you to design green roofs? And
right.
What type of green roof do you usually go for? Is it expensive or intensive green roofs?
Right. It depends. Clients come in all shapes and sizes and forms and with different attitudes. More and more, there is an environmental awareness and a willingness to make the budget available to do some pretty astonishing things. Clients get it in general, not always. As to whether or not it's an intense roof I don't like the sedum that much. We have done a few. It's much lighter and it's easier to do. But I'm very fond of the old wildflower, and sometimes we even go as far as quite substantial trees and bushes, which we're doing on that Gower one at the moment that I showed a section of in the talk. We do promote them quite heavily, I have to say, simply because I believe if you can pick up the site, insert your building and put back the site, it's morally a good thing to do, and it just makes sense. I mean, how many people have got a pitched roof, you know, oh yeah, it's the loft, we use it for putting our what? Yeah, your suitcases, dust, and you know, some nonsense. So it's much better to be either up there in it or up there in it and on it. It just, to me, it's blindingly obvious, you know?
All right. That's it. Thank you very much, sir.
Nice.
Chris, the question of the client and how you work with a client did kind of make me think of a number of things you were talking about earlier. Quite a few times in your talk, you came back to this thing about specificity and, you know, having kind of material to work with, and you mentioned that making these kind of larger, more sort of bespoke, one-off, purpose-designed homes is quite disconnected from going into a small house and making kind of, you know, little incisions that kind of change the thing. But actually, particularly when you're describing the relationship between the two artists that live in the outhouse and their work and the architecture, it felt like you'd drawn a huge amount from their work and who they are and that sort of thing. And that feels almost like it kind of replaces the kind of constraints and the kind of things you'd be working with if you were, you know, designing in, for example, a very established existing house or in a kind of very particular urban context. And I just wondered how do you go about sort of extracting all of that information out of your clients?
Yeah, good question. What you learn on every single project, I think, is applicable to every other project. You never stop learning. And what I've learned from the big houses, I mean, I wanted to be a community architect working on affordable housing. That was my drive when I think how I ended up doing these mega things in the landscape, Lord only knows. But I'm very keen, and I actually give a talk called Full Circle. We are now, at last, we're on the Cardiff City framework, we're looking at affordable housing, and all of my experience from the last 33 years and working on a lot of big houses is incredibly valuable back, even on the smallest project. It's to do with material selection, it's to do with detail, it's to do with communication. It's to do with building relationships. And you're right, Ed, that connection with the client is absolutely critical. Sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, we've had the ones who have got away, you know, they got fed up with Loyn banging on about this or that or the other, and they've gone somewhere else. That's okay. You've got to be compatible with your client, and you've got to listen, and you've got to understand their point of view. And I really mean it when, you know, you're going to be together for a long time and you're going to be going through a difficult process, particularly if you're mucking about with their home whilst they're living in it. You know, that's asking for trouble. I mean, part of the architect's appointment should, I think, include marriage guidance counselling. You know, because it's fireworks go off quite often, and you've got to be there and calm it down and put it back together again. You know, it's a pressure time. But I think the answer is to be honest, to be open, not to be dogmatic, to be willing to be taught yourself, and you know, Crandell, Welsh for listen. And I think that's what we should be doing. I know a lot of my other architect friends are much more forceful than I am, I think. I'm quite a softie in many respects, but I think that works well when you're dealing with a lay public who generally don't really understand what architects do. I wish architecture was part of the school curriculum, and not because we want millions and millions and millions and millions of architects, but because you want an aware client. And when you do get that, as with Michael and Jean in Outhouse, they were fantastic. You know, and we've had a lot of absolutely fabulous clients, you know, blessed with it, very, very lucky. Does that sort of go some way to answering your question, Ed?
It does. Thanks, Chris, and thanks for the talk. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, good. Anyone else got anything?
Does anybody else have any questions? No? We're good? Okay. Okay, well, Chris, thank you so much for the talk today. Everyone, I'm pretty sure everyone enjoyed it. It was really interesting. And the recording is going to be on the YouTube channel, hopefully soon. So
I don't listen to that. I'm not.
No, I'm sure more people will enjoy it. So everyone go subscribe. We'll put it on the Instagram.
He knows me.
Yeah. And it was amazing first lecture to our series. So guys, look up on our Instagram for next events happening. And again, thank you very much, Chris, for starting our session because it was an amazing and very interesting start.
And thank you, Ed, for helping us organize it.
Like I said, I had the easy job. Thanks both of you for hosting today. And again, these things are the most awkward thing about the remote conversations is just the bit at the end where there's no audible applause. So really big thank you from all of us, Chris, for your time today.
I'll give you one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
The old Matt Casper. Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.